This video is of course brought by and presented by the EA Creator Network. So thank you very much EA for giving me the chance to play FIFA 22 early, and of course to bring you this controller settings video. Now in today's video I want to explain to you the best controller settings to use, and don't forget this is the start of the game. There's going to be a bit of adaptation, so do expect yourself to not get the graphs straight away, but let's just get straight into it. So Competitive Master Switch is basically a switch which is going to be used for all the online game modes, mainly the ones where you play, for example, like Foot Champions and Rivals. So agile dribbling, before the game used to do it for you automatically, and stuff like manual jockeying now is all on manual. So I'll explain to you. So you put this on, I'll tell you what's changed. So through pass distance is now semi. That means you kind of more have to aim your pass as opposed to just pressing the through ball button, just pressing triangle and kind of hoping for the best. Manual jockeying has changed. So jockeying before, assisted basically meant that the game helps you with your speed. So that means if you go near your opponent, and let's say, for example, your opponent has the ball inside the box, and let's say you're near him, the game will slow you down, slow the player down, so that way you keep in line with your opponent. That's what it basically is. But because that's now on manual and it forces you to use manual, the game doesn't slow you down anymore. So from now on, you have to remember to either use a jockey by itself or do what I do and use a left analog stick to control the speed of the running jockey. So remember, the jockey will not stick with the opponent like it did before. Think of it kind of like a bit of like an aim lock. Basically, you used to kind of stay in the same lane as them, as now you're kind of in a different lane. You're basically by yourself. The FIFA trainer just shows, for example, like the shot elevation. Can you reach a time shot and your pass movement? To be honest, you're not going to have this on, but if you're completely new to the game, if you're going to play kickoff game modes, I'd recommend having this on a show. And then when you go online, recommend having this hidden. Now, time shooting is one factor that's a bit more prevalent this year. In contrast to last year, I'd recommend for you to leave this on. If you're not good at time shooting, then don't worry. But now long shots outside the box have proven to be quite effective this year, especially timed finesse shots outside the box. The video will be coming on that soon, and you'll see loads of videos on a Patreon as well, link down below in the description. But if you want to see more on that, you can see those videos. But I'll be honest, time shooting, leave it on. The reason why is it's more effective to time your shots now. Long shots outside the box have more of an influence, with time shooting being green and have a higher chance of it going in. So for now, I'll leave it on. If you're not used to it and you spam the shoot button when you're inside the box, then I'll leave it off. So if you're a new player, I would say leave it off for now. But if you're an existing player, you play 21, leave it on. There might be a slight learning curve, but it's better to learn it that way and then turn it off straight away. The next player switch indicator is really important, because let's say, for example, you're defending and you're selecting this defender. If you want to switch to another defender, there's going to be like a grayed out icon above that player's head. So when you press the L1 button, it'll switch from that player to that player immediately. So if you have this on, there'll be a gray icon above that player, so that way you'll know who you'll be switching to. If you have it on off, you'll just have basically the player you're controlling and another player next to him. There'll be no indicator above his head. So I normally leave this on because I like to see which player I'm switching to. But I know some people don't like to have too many things on a pitch, so you can leave it off. But I recommend leaving it on, because that way when you press the L1 button, you know exactly who you're switching to immediately. Pass block assistance, leave it on. There's not that much difference. There's no actual positives this year from now to leave on. But of course, there'll be a post-patch update of this video. So you're watching this in October. There probably is a video coming out. A new video, so go ahead and check that one. Auto switching, I would recommend for most players to leave on air balls and loose balls. The default used to be automatic, but do not use this. Air balls and loose balls is the best thing for you to use, because automatic, sometimes the ball goes in the air, or let's say, for example, someone makes a pass. If you're controlling, let's say, for example, you have your back foot over here and your CDM's over here. If your opponent's, you want to make it a running behind, you might want to use your CDM to get the ball. If you have this an automatic, the game will switch to someone in your back line. So don't let the game switch for you. You only want the game to switch for you if the ball is 6 feet or higher in the air. For example, like a lofted through ball, or a lob through ball, or a cross. Auto switch move assistance. This is only if you, so let's say, for example, you have the ball over here, and let's say, for example, you're defending and the back line's over here. If, for example, the game switches to your defender, the game will move you in assistance for a short period of time, or none, or low. I'd recommend for most players, if you play Foot Champions last year in divisions, if you're above Division 3, I'd highly recommend you leaving this on low. Division 1 and 2, I would say none, mainly Division 1. And anything, if you're new to the game, leave on high. High I wouldn't recommend. As soon as you get used to the game, you want to change this to low, because sometimes, let's say, if the game switches you to this player, if someone's running it behind, you might want to manually run backwards as opposed to go towards the ball. So I leave this on none, personally speaking, because I don't want the game to influence how I move my players. Then we have the clearance assistance. You have classic. Clearance, direction, and powers are fully assisted and do not take into account user input. And we have the new one, which is directional. Now, directional takes into account the user input. In my opinion, I would say leave it on directional, because you don't want the, if you're like, you got the ball on the back line over here and your goal's over here, unless you've got a player here and a player here, if your opponent's here, if it's on classic, you might pass the ball to your opponent. So at least have somewhat of a directional assistance. That way, be like, okay, if you're going to spam the X button out of the box, at least you're going out of the danger zone. The player lock, again, this is the whole, you hold the L3 and R3 buttons in together. You have the player lock feature. You can leave this on. It doesn't really affect your gameplay because no one really, by mistake, presses these in together. A video will be on that soon. Icon switching, I'd recommend is leaving this on. This is mainly to do with the... Think of right stick switching last year. There was ball relative and then there's player relative. Well, there is now a new one called player rotation. So leave this on because you're not going to press it by mistake. Now, player, this is important. I use ball relative, but there's a new one called player rotation. I'll make a video explaining what this is. But player relative, imagine this is the player that you selected, and this is all your opponents, okay? Now, on player relative, if you want to select, for example, player number 2, then so let's say, for example, here is where the player selected. You flick your right analog stick, let's say, to the left-hand side. Think of it like a clock. You flick it to around about 11 o'clock. Why? It's because the player switch button is over there. In contrast, if you're controlling, let's say, player number 2 and you want to go to player 1, how would you go from player 1? You flick it to the right-hand side. Right? Why? It's because, look, the player selecting is now this player 2, so you flick it to the right-hand side. So imagine it like a clock. Basically, wherever the red cursor is above that player's head, whichever player you want to switch, there's a player over there, then you flick it to the right-hand side, the player over there, you flick it to the bottom right, kind of like 5 o'clock on the clock. I use ball relative because the logic is you always want to choose a player close to the ball. And let's say, for example, the ball is over here and you've got 2 players over here. Let's say, for example, you're controlling this player over here. Sometimes you might want to select player number 2. With ball relative is relative to where the ball is. So the benefit of ball relative is if you want to switch to, for example, player 2, you flick it once to the right-hand side and you will immediately switch to player 2. Sometimes on player relative, this might switch to player 3 by mistake. So that's the benefit of using ball relative in a more simple form. But basically, wherever the ball is, and because your eyes are always tracking where the ball is, in my opinion, it increases your reaction time. So if you want to switch to player 1 or player 2 or player 3, so if you want to switch to player 1, you flick it to the top right, player 2, bottom left, and player 3 to the bottom right. And it'll always be like that. So depending on where the ball is, you flick it to wherever. If there's a guy behind player 4, then you flick it behind twice. A very quick and effective solution, and it reduces errors. The new one is called player rotation. Now, this is when you press the R3 button and you can select what player you want to select in theory. I've got a quick example of how it looks like in the screen right now. I'll be honest, it just takes too long. I wouldn't recommend doing it. I would say either use player relative or ball relative. If you're new to the game, use ball relative. If you're an old school player, go with what you're used to, player relative. But in my opinion, the only negative behind ball relative is pressing. Now I'm talking about pro level pressing or top tier division 1 pressing, elite level pressing. If you're not doing that, in my opinion, stick it on ball relative. Unless you're so used to player relative, then leave it on that. Ground passes, leave it on assisted. There's no point of changing any of these because you don't want the game to, you're not going to get any benefits by leaving this on manual. There is a benefit of this, but it's not going to affect you unless you're a pro player. Cross assistance, you want to leave this on a semi. The reason why is with assisted, the game is automatic. So let's say you're down the wing over here and the opponent's goal's there. The game will just always cross the ball to you every single time to a player at random. But if you use semi, you can now control how much power is on the ball. So if, for example, you do a lot of power, the ball will go to the back post. Moderate power, the ball will go to the middle. And then a little bit of power, the ball will go to the near post. So kind of short. So this way you can decide how far you want the ball to go. So more power, the ball will go to the back post. Closer, the ball will go to the near post. Now, on assisted, you basically have no choice. You can kind of aim who you want to give it to, but you can't control the power. So if there's someone at the back post, you can't control that. Lob pass isn't, leave it on assisted. Save on assisted as well. Analog sprint. Now, this is the most important thing. if you use the R1 button to sprint, this is irrelevant. This is only for the R2 button. The best way I can explain this is, so let's say your sprint button in theory, let's say it's R2, yeah? Let's say in theory it's R2. If you have this on, if you hold the sprint button and this is on, it's going to act like a gas pedal. So think of it when you have the ball and you're running in a straight line. If you have the R2 button only pressed down incrementally, you're going to be going only at 30% of the sprint speed. You don't want that. You want to be going at 100% all the time. So using the run and jockey and you're defending, if you have just a little bit of pressure on the R2 button, you're not going to be running at full speed all the time. So that's why it's important to leave this on off. That way you're going from 0 to 100 to the Z zone all the time. You don't want it to be going from 0 to 30 and being like, why am I not increasing? Because let's say reaction time, you go from 0 to, then you probably go to 100 gradually. So you want to go straight from 0 to 100 immediately. The only reason I'll leave this on is if you're using left stick dribbling, but left stick dribbling is completely done, in my opinion. It's completely, almost irrelevant now. You have to use agile, not irrelevant, but agile dribbling is more prevalent to use and more efficient to use inside the box now. But if you want to control the speed of your left stick dribbling, so it's on off. Player lock receiver, basically long story short, if you make a pass, if you press the X button, that's it, the player is locked on early. If you press the pass button, let's say you press X, once you make the pass, you cannot change it whatsoever. The benefit of leaving this on late is, let's say you make a pass, the ball is already moving, but you find that someone is sneakily cut that passing lane out. You can move your left analog stick to another player and you can change the pass as long as, in theory, the pass has not hit. So let's say, for example, the ball is at my, let me explain this again, sorry. The ball's at my feet, should I say. Let's say I'm aiming, that the dotted line is showing I'm going to this player. My opponent's intercepting that. I can change and I can pass to this player as long as this player has not kicked the ball. So that's the benefit. As long as the player has not kicked the ball, then you can change it at last minute. And it's very, very effective because someone's pressing your player, you can switch to another player very, very soon. I have a full video explaining how that works as well. Again, if you're watching this even in early time September, I'll have a video on my channel, so go check that out on my channel. User vibration feedback, I'll leave this on personally off because I don't want it acts like basically there's PS5 mechanic. You have like a kind of a mechanic where it's hard to press the R2 button. You don't want to make it harder. So that's about it. Controller settings, now I use ISS controls. So in case you're wondering what on earth this is basically old school ISS or PES controls or eFootball, what they call now. That's old school ISS. The reason why I still use this is because the fake shot's easier to do with a square and X, and a square being a shoot button. You got a higher chance of pressing the shoot button from the right analog stick. Better for right stick switching. It's easier for you to press the tackle button with the X button, with the right stick switch being over there. And it's easier for, instead of going from this to circle, being tackle, you can go from that to X. See that? Increase your reaction time. And that is the reason why I keep the old school ISS PES settings. I've not changed it. And even, for example, defending, if you spam because the tackle button's the X button, sometimes, you know, when you're defending and you press the X button and the game registers as a pass to your teammate. So you can basically spam the X button and you can almost pass the ball instead of tackling it first and then passing the ball. So you can have that extra benefit. And that's the reason why I do not change it. So my tackle button is not on circle, it's on X. In all honesty, use the exact same controller settings you've been used for many, many years. Do not change it. But people always ask me, why do I keep using ISS controls? It's because they're superior. The only thing that I lose, in my opinion, is the sprint button not being on the R2 button. But apart from that, it has every other benefit. And also teammate contain. Who wants to have teammate contain the R1 button? Of course you don't. You want teammate contain or compressor to be on square. That way you can quickly change for it when you, so let's say you flick players to the, let's say you're switching players, you flick players and you can hold square and you can hold X at the same time if you want to tackle. I mean, it's the best controller settings in my opinion, part of the run button. But again, just stick to what you're used to. Don't change it because I'm saying it. I'm just saying use what you've been using for many years. I'm just explaining to you why I use it and why the reaction time is important. But anyway guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget I'll update on this video on my channel very, very soon. Link down below in the description for my Twitch. And of course my Patreon if you want to join the FIFA School. Of course, join the FIFA School. We'll be making FIFA 22 footage for you and a money back guarantee on that. Thanks for watching boys. Take it easy and have a wonderful evening.